see on the screen, Genein Letford is with us from CAFFE, CAFFE Strategies. As the 2019 LA Lakers businesswoman and the 2015 CA Charter Teacher of the Year, Genein is a national thought leader and creator of the concept of intercultural creativity and neurosomatic creativity. She is the founder and chief creative officer of CAFFE Strategies, LLC, which is a consulting, coaching, and training company that trains C-suite executives and employees to create sustainable organizational equity and inclusion strategies based on neuroscience while unleashing their innovative thinking for themselves and in their businesses. Her 7 Gems of Intercultural Creativity is a leading framework that encourages corporations in their diversity and inclusion development while developing critical cognitive tools for creative thinking. She holds degrees in psychology and educational development from UCLA and CSUN, is certified in brain-centric design, and her curriculum is rooted in neuroscience and cognitive psychology. Genein believes creative thinking thrives best in an inclusive environment, and she is often called America's creative coach for her work in reigniting intercultural creativity within our workforce. Please welcome Genein Letford. Genein, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. So if I had my way, I would have you all like stand up in the pictures that you drew with Chris. I would have you act them out, right? And we there's a lot of work coming from Dr. Eric Jarvis. And you heard from Dr. Michael Platt, one of my mentors. He was on my podcast, and I really study his work, the importance of movement, right? So I am going to start sharing my screen so we can get started. All right, so this is a diamond. Who wish they had, this was an actual diamond that you owned, right? And the logo of my company is a diamond for a lot of reasons. You know, I can talk about the origination of a diamond and being a diamond in the rough, but there's a story that I love to share, and I'll share it really quick, about a man who owned a farm. And on the farm, he was just farming and farming and farming. And every now and then a passerby would come by and talk about striking it rich and finding a diamond mine. And then another passerby would come by about 3 months later and share the same story about he struck it rich and because he found a diamond mine. And by the third person that came by to share how they struck it rich by finding a diamond mine on the continent of Africa, right? The farmer got just really saddened about his life and where he was. And then so he decided to sell the farm that he owned for pennies on the dollar and go off and find his own diamond mine. And so that's what he did. And he went high and low, up and down the mountains, the Sierras, until he ended up passing away. Meanwhile, the person who purchased the farm for pennies on the dollar was walking along the creek, and he saw something sparkle off in the distance. So he went and grabbed it and picked it up and went home and just put it on the mantle place. 2 weeks went by and a friend came by, and she just happened to be a jeweler, but she saw the gem on the mantelpiece and she said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's just some little rock. There's actually a whole bunch over there by the creek." And she walked closer to it, picked it up, and smoothed it off, just took off the dirt. And she said, do you know what this is? It had happened to be, of course, a diamond in the rough. So they went back to the area where he located it, and sprinkled all along the creek were little diamonds. It turned out that the original farmer owned free and clear acres of diamonds without even knowing it. And possibly because he didn't even know what they looked like. The reason why this story is paramount and the foundational story, we heard the importance of storytelling, right, of my work, is because I want to ask you where you are right now. Are you standing in your own acres of diamonds without even realizing it? Have you thought about that? And so that's really what this work is about. I'm excited to share this with you. I hope to really shift your perspectives around some concepts and introduce some new concepts as well. Let me keep my clock in front of me so I know where we have fun hour. I am producing and introducing the concept of intercultural creativity. Now, these are two concepts together that I'll quickly define to make sure we're on along the same definitions. Cultural competence, or cultural awareness, cultural development, and creative thinking. We have the 7 gems and the diamonds right there in the middle. So the 7 gems of intercultural creativity. Before I jump in, I want to make sure that we as a group understand what I mean when I say cultural competence. Do you know that person in your life that brightens up a room just by walking out? Do you have that, right? Well, that's not a good example of cultural competence. But do you know that person that no matter where they go, they're able to connect with the people who they're around, no matter if they're with people from different social economic levels, people from different education levels, people from different ethnic cultures or nationalities, they're just very aware, right? And they're very in tune with people's emotional communication, and they can just really help people feel comfortable around them and share. That person more than likely is high in cultural competence. The definition that we are presenting is cultural competence or cultural awareness, right? Your ability to be observant and to shift perspective with different people from different lived backgrounds. Cultural competence is key. As you heard from a lot of our speakers earlier today, I sat in on a few of them. It's this thing that's in the background, yet crucial for every element of your personal life, your professional life, and everything in between with creativity. So that's what I mean by cultural competence. Some people use the term cultural awareness. I also use the term cultural development. And we want to get to cultural compassion, right? How do you really act in compassion towards people from different lived backgrounds? So once again, the term observing similarities and differences with complexity, there's a key word there, to adapt your behavior in different various cultural situations and with different people from different cultural backgrounds. Lastly, before I go on from this slide, when I say culture, I don't just mean ethnicity, right? Or nationality. Culture is just a group of people, which you've heard this word a lot today, a group of people together with well-defined attitudes, beliefs. I say the theme song of culture is, this is how we do it, right? This is how we do things around here. This is how things are done. That's what I mean by culture. So it's bigger than just ethnicity, even though that is a part of it as well. All right, so we know creative thinking. A lot of you have your background in creativity. This is what you do. But when I give these keynotes and these trainings, a lot of people think creativity is only artistry. So believe it or not, I'm dealing with these falsified beliefs that are actually holding people within these jails, right? These creative jails. So I really want to make sure people understand that creativity sits on multiple cognitive structures. The definition that I'm using, and I know there's a lot of different definitions out there, but I say creative thinking is the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty, right? That newness. And highly creative people aren't just waiting for their bosses or leaders to put things in their lap. They're out there being proactive. They're asking questions. They're like, well, why are we doing it this way? Have we ever tried it that way before? Those are your creative thinkers. And so, as you know, you've heard before, divergent thinking with convergent thinking, but a lot of times you have a lot of convergent thinking going on without the divergent thinking. So I really want to stress divergent thinking, reframing, combinatory thinking. Albert Einstein said the essence of all thought is combinatory play, right? What does that look like? Associations, the usual associations. And something I haven't heard yet today, something that I use a lot in my work, metaphorical thinking, right? Just so you know, my background is in elementary ed. I'm an elementary school teacher by trade, and now I work a lot with corporations and organizations and adults. But my job is to get adults back to their elementary type of imagination and thinking and openness. So a lot of metaphorical thinking practice happens around the 4th grade. It's a 4th grade standard in California. But now we need to get metaphorical practice into adulthood. What does it look like to use metaphors? Metaphors are a huge creative tool for highly creative thinkers. and people who are able to challenge the status quo. If your boss is saying, well, we've never done it that way, or we don't do things that way, we do things this way, and they've been saying that for the past 20 years, you might have an issue with innovation. So that's creative thinking. And it's the number one skill. Those of you who look at your research, you know, it's one of the top skills by the World Economic Forum needed. And so if it's so important in the workforce, we also need to make sure it's in K-12. When I say K-12, I mean kindergarten to 12th grade and at the university level as well. What does this look like? And so that is intercultural creativity. But the aha that my work presents is that your cultural competence, your cultural awareness, your ability to connect with people from different lived backgrounds is correlated and influences your ability to be creative. They sit on the same set of cognitive skills. And that's what the book that I wrote about really shows, is that if we're here all day today and tomorrow and this whole symposium talking about creative thinking, but no one's talking about your ability to be culturally competent and culturally aware and your ability to connect with people from different lived backgrounds. Like Dr. Platt talked about your social brain, right? What does that look like to grow your social brain with diverse experiences? Then we're missing half of the conversation. So cultural competence plus creative thinking is intercultural creativity, and we talk about how they influence one another. For my research, I put them into 7 gems just to make them chunkable, and we're going to talk and we're going to do some practice around 1 gem today, but really quick, and I go deeper in this in the book. The first gem, creative growth mindset. Based off of the work of Carol Dweck, growth mindset, fixed mindset. Hopefully you have a background in this, but in case you don't, she found out that mindsets, as you know, mindsets are huge with your ability to see yourself as a creative and your ability to see the creative potential in others. Growth mindset means, you know that you could get better at doing something if you work at it. You say, I may not be good at this yet. You know that it's a developmental process. Fixed mindset, and it is a continuum, so be aware of that. But fixed mindset means, you know what, I'm not good at it, so I'll never be good at it. A lot of people, when I do a lot of corporate trainings, a lot of people have a fixed mindset around their own creativity. They're like, I can't do that, I'm not creative. Or they have the artistic fixed mindset. I can't sing, I can't draw, so I'm not creative. So you have millions of people out there saying to themselves and their subconscious that they're not creative. And when their job, their family life, society, COVID, right, needs you to be creative, you've been telling yourself you're not creative for the past 20 years. So what does that do to the mindset? So that's gem number 1. The next gem, the empathetic way. Remember, I talked about how both of these affect both areas. Empathy affects your ability for your cultural competence, but empathy also affects your ability for creative thinking. They hit both areas. I sat down with the second episode on my podcast, the Create and Grow podcast. I sat down with Mitch Cohan, who sat down with 20 billionaires, right, and asked and looked at their mindset. And the second mindset stream they found was empathetic imagination. Empathy is a cultural competency skill. Imagination is a creative skill together, right? So they were able to produce value, not that money is everything, but they were able to produce value because they were empathetic. The third one we're going to talk about today, cultural observation. I'll go deeper into that today. The fourth one, cultural curiosity. Once again, huge skill needed for cultural development. Also huge skill needed for creative thinking. It goes hand in hand. This one, Dr. Platt talked about it earlier a lot, perspective shifting. Key for creative thinking, you need to be able to move your imagination and experiences around the problem, see other angles. That's another reason why the diamond is my logo, because it's multifaceted. But perspective shifting is also needed to increase your cultural competence, your development, your cultural compassion. And as Dr. Platt mentioned, your social brain. You have to be able to perspective shift. So we do a lot of training around that, especially on our leadership level and our C-suite level. You have to know how to perspective shift. Authentic adaptation. What does it look like to be adaptive in different situations? And I say authentic because you have to know you, be true to you. And the last gem, is creating across cultures. Highly creative people are able to be those bridge spanners. Seth Godin talks about this, and which another author who I love, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his book, The Tipping Point, that you want people who are on the edge in different disciplines because they can see different ways of doing things. Those are your bridge connectors. But turns out they're highly culturally competent, but they're also highly creative as well. So my work really looks at the intersection between these two fields. And that's your 7 gems. Once again, go deeper into it into the book. So we'll share about that at the end. But I'm here to share about the 3rd gem, cultural observation. Cultural observation. A lot of you may have been to training, like communication training. You may have been to sales training or professional development if you're in the university level, right? Or curriculum training. Have you ever been to observation training? What is that? Well, I want to guarantee you in the next decade, this will be a thing. Because think about it, your ability to be creative rests on your ability to observe. So we're going to dive into this. Has anyone seen this before? Has anyone seen this logo before? I know we have a global audience, so this establishment may not be everywhere. But here's the interesting point. I had a friend once say, Genein, for the longest time, I thought his bow tie was his body. Do you see it now? And so, yeah, now you can't unsee it, right? I thought his bow tie was his body. And now you're just looking at the person like, really? Like, wow. But I love sharing that story. Number one, it's funny. Laughter is really important when you're presenting because it really opens, chemicals in the brain. It opens up things. So always bring in laughter when you can. But it showed me that my friend and I could be looking at the same exact stimulus and have 2 different experiences with it, right? We've heard about this earlier, but here's the kicker. They're culturally influenced. Because my friend did not have exposure to men's formal attire, right? The concept of bow tie was not in her brain. So her brain just switched it to what she was exposed to. And so for those of you working with clients, for those of you leading teams, for those of you in your culture of your home, if you have children or dependents, you really tapping into them and connecting with them and seeing what they see, what are their cultural constructs that are informing the way that they're observing. That was huge because you can be given a lecture or leading a meeting and you see a bow tie, but half the room sees stick figure bodies. And you have no clue because you may not have made that extra connection. So I love making that point of going back to that social brain connection. Am I creating opportunities for social interactions so I can learn the conceptual frameworks that my team members are coming into? That is a big part of creativity. And this shows us that exposure affects observation. What your people have been exposed to affects how they observe. It also shows us that culture affects observation. There's a great book, and I'm really big on books, so you might get a few books recommendations, so be aware of that. But there's a great book called The Culture Map, and Erin Meyer is a cultural specialist. She goes around the world and helps companies with their cultural connections and development. And she talked about a study where they had, in this case, when I say culture, I mean ethnic and national culture, where they had people from the Western cultures look at an aquarium. And then they had people from the Eastern cultures look at an aquarium. And they noticed that people from the Western cultures were focused on the foreground of what was going on in the aquarium. And people from the Eastern cultures were more focused on the background. What this shows us is that where you grew up affects what you observe. And that's why diversity, equity, inclusion is so important, to not just get people together who are diverse, but get them in a psychologically safe place where they can speak up, There's creative abrasion going on. There's synchrony going on, but also, diversity of thought. It's so important because if you have everyone in a room who looks like you, thinks like you, has the same background as you, same place from, everything's the same practically. Yes, you're all agreeing about the same things, but you're also missing the same things as well. And so for us to really get this creative revolution going, how do we greatly diversify our groups in a way where people feel the freedom and the safety to share and to contribute? That's going to be very, very important. And when I say observe, right, this is the observation gem. I don't just mean to see. To observe means to use all of your faculties, your senses, even your other senses that aren't a part of the basic five, your emotional sense, your creative sense, your spiritual sense. Observe comes from the Latin word observare. It means to attend to. What are you paying attention to? If you were here earlier with Dr. Platt, he talked about the key work of attention. What does that look like from the neurological level? Yes, I do have a brain. I carry one in here and I carry one right here when I travel. Try getting on the plane with this. And try getting on the plane with this. They stop me like every time, right? But what is going on in your brain that's influencing your attention? I have a 4-year-old at home, and his attention levels are greatly expanded and different than mine. And so when you have your team members, how are you helping them take more control of where their attention is going? How are you influencing their attention? What are you paying attention to? And so we're going to dive in. Like I said, my background is in elementary ed. I'm very interactive. When I go up to trainings, I have Play-Doh and Legos and pipe cleaners and everything, because the best way to learn is to do, right? To do and then reflect. So I need you to look around your area. Look around your area and grab one object. I need you to look around your area and grab one object and hold your object in front of your camera when you can. And I'm actually going to stop share. Hold your object. Does everyone have an object in their hand? Okay. Now you're going to go into breakout rooms, but here's your assignment, right? I'm still a credentialed teacher from California, so I can still give you create work. I don't call it homework, but create work. Your assignment is to look at the object that hopefully you've had for a while, you've owned for, for months or a year or whatever, and look for 2 new things that you've never noticed before. Okay, and observe. Let me say, not say look. Observe 2 new things. So there's a key thing. Observe, which means to use how many of your faculties? Observe 2 new things that you've never noticed before. That's the first thing. Does everyone have that? Thumbs up? Right. This is called total physical response. It's always good to get a physical response from your crowd. And if you want, think of a life lesson that object can teach you. If you have time to talk about it, but what are 2 things you've never noticed before? And metaphorically speaking, what could this object teach you? So if this is my object, my water bottle, what are 2 things I've never noticed before on the water bottle? And metaphorically, what could this water bottle teach me about life, about love, relationships, work, whatever you want to talk about? Does everyone understand their task? Okay, all right, we can put people into breakout rooms. You'll have about 2 minutes a person. Hopefully about 3 people are in each breakout room, and then we'll come back. All right, going into breakout rooms. You can do your breakout pose. Give me a breakout pose. Breakout. Thank you. All right, we'll see you in about eight minutes or so. Okay. All right, do we have maybe 1 or 2 people who may want to share out? I just love to hear. I can talk for days, but I love to hear other voices, vocal diversity. Does anyone want to share their object and what they didn't notice before, or the life lesson that object may metaphorically teach you? Anyone? I would normally have stickers to pass out. You get a sticker, you get a sticker. Who would like to share? Okay, go for it.
I'll do it to make up for being late. I have this beautiful pottery bowl that came from Mexico, and I'm sitting here trying to remember where in Mexico. And it's been sitting up on my shelf because I just love the black and white design. But what I never noticed is the inside of the lid is unglazed. So it made me think, why is that unglazed? And I'd also hadn't remembered that it was signed by the artist. But what really struck me was how I've left it empty on the top shelf and forgotten about it. And maybe I should remember it. Maybe I should call it and say what it wants to be here, or maybe let it go to someone who will call it. But there's so much around me that evokes memories of places I've been, but I don't always pay attention to them.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's our key word, right? Attention. What are you paying attention to? Which is the root word from the Latin to observe. Does and for the life lesson, did anyone else want to give a life lesson off of what she shared? So Barb said you can put quarters in it. Extra penance.
It relates a bit to a conversation we had in our room about objects. So here, this is my object. It is a cup. I made it. I'm a potter. And Martha also has thought about doing pottery, but has a bit of, and other creative works, but has a bit of resistance because she doesn't really want to collect too many objects. And so I think we were talking about sort of our relationship with things and how one can be intentional with what one gathers. And it relates to what Nancy was saying about one's attention. So intention and attention, why we're doing what we're doing, and the meaning, how to make sure things are meaningful around us. Maybe.
Yes. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to share their item?
I don't mind sharing. If you want me to share?
Please go for it. Ms. Eleanor.
It's a bit random. It's like a Easter Island kind of wooden ornament, maybe, which I just grabbed when you said grab something. I was with Barb, and what we talked about was I hadn't really noticed it, even though it's really useful because it's actually, you put your to keep your glasses, so you know when you keep losing them everywhere. So I thought, wow, why don't I use that? It's just sitting there. Why don't I use it? So that was the first thing, like maybe you should use things and not take them for granted, and so they blend into the background. And then we got talking about where it had come from, and I said, yeah, I probably bought it not even knowing its purpose. I just like the look of it, and then realized, oh, it has a purpose. So yeah, we were kind of talking about that, and Barb had a really interesting object as well, which was kind of, there you go, which was this thing that, you know, you could just say, well, it's just a speaker, it's just a thing that's kind of sitting on the desk. But when we looked at it, it was actually really beautiful, and the detail and the color. So yeah, it was kind of appreciating things in a bit more detail. And as Barb beautifully said, there's beauty everywhere. So that was our sort of life lesson, you know, even in things that we around us every day, there's beauty in it. So
I love that. There's a few things I want to touch upon there. First of all, someone talked about the unfinished lid, right? And that could be a whole prompt itself. Another thing of looking at the beauty. And the other thing about the purpose. There's a concept that I talk about in the book. And if you did want to get the book, kind of go to my website as opposed to Amazon, because I can sign it for you and put stickers in it and do all this other stuff. But I want you to understand the concept of functional agility, right? There's a term called functional fixedness, which if you know, like, here's a pen, the function of this pen is to write, right? Whereas my 4-year-old would take the pen and turn it into a drumstick. He would turn it into a projectile. He would turn it into 15 other things. Children are highly functionally agile. It's you buying them a toy, they play with the toy for 2 minutes, and they play with the box for 2 hours. That's the concept of functional agility. So when she said, you know, what's the purpose of this item? The purpose is limited by your imagination. Like, what do you want to use it for, right? And put your glasses on it. I would have never thought of that, but that's what you saw. And so that's the other aspect of really creativity happens in your brain, of course, but it happens between brains. And theirs goes back to Dr. Platt. I'm going to be referencing him like 15 times more during this talk. But the social aspect of creativity is huge, right? You just by saying that opened my eyes to, well, what's in my area that I can change the function of and use it in a different way. And in the book, I actually talk about a research study that uses functional agility and brings it into the office. And he looked at adults who are highly functionally agile. Those were the ones giving the more innovative ideas on the team projects. So once again, I'm doing like little elementary things like, oh, pick an object and Legos and stuff. Then you transfer it to the higher order advance. But the brain learns on the elementary level, the concept, right? The conceptual level, and then you can take it where you want to go. So Dr. Platt also talked about ego. I'm working with a person who's very high up on the C-suite scale, and he's working with creativity. And he's like, Genein, when I go in there and do creativity workshops, the C-suite, peeks in and say, okay, have fun, and leaves. And it's the C-suite who needs to be in the workshop, because as Dr. Platt said, the higher you go in level, the less you see, because you're not taking the perspective of everyone else. But if you just got onboarded last week, you're like, okay, who's what, who has power, who has control, who's doing what, who has the influence. You're looking at everyone and where you need to, just do your thing and who's doing what. So keep that in mind. Purpose, functional agility, do this on your own and for fun. If you have children around you, do it with them, but it strengthens the muscles. So when you're in that board meeting, that team meeting, bam, you're functionally agile with whatever your topic you're talking about, just like you're functionally agile with your marker, your pen, your little object that you chose. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Like I said, I'm active.
I could add something.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, that show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? And they used to take different objects and they'd see how long they could go with ideas of what the objects were. I did that for a group of engineers before a goal setting session, and they went absolutely nuts with it. They loved it, which if you had gone to them and said, we're going to do something fun and creative and, think out of the box, like, whoa, I can't do that. I have to analyze and I have to be structured. And it really got them into a different frame of mind for the workshop.
And thank you for sharing that, because we did a lot of work with this within sometimes the hard science, the tech field, right? Where once you bring up language is very powerful, because language starts to construct your imagination around whatever you're talking about, right? And so, just bringing it in. And so everything that I'm doing, please, they say teachers are the biggest thieves. If we see a teacher doing something cool, we'll bring it into our own classroom. So everything that I'm doing, steal it. Take it. If you're a team lead or whatever level you are, everyone's a leader, even if you're the leader of you, right? You're the CEO of you. Wherever you lead, bring these ideas, bring these, I call them oxy-ops, these oxytocin opportunities, and really switch it up. Instead of saying, hey, let's introduce yourself. I'm Genein, and I have the normal thing. Everyone bring an object, introduce yourself through that object, so keep that in mind. All right, so let's keep going so we can end on time and hopefully have time for a bio break. So messages in the mundane, that's what you just did. The highly creative person, they're able to extract, first of all, to observe well, but to extract the wisdom, the higher concepts in everyday items around them. Right? It's kind of like the walking to the mailbox. I walk straight to the mailbox, get my mail and come back. But my son, he sees 15 different things on the way to the mailbox. So do you take time to observe the normal things in your everyday area? Like I said, I'm a big on books. So I have Dr. Platt's book right here. I highly recommend it. If I was the principal of the world, I would make every leader get his book. So I told him he needs to pay me part of his royalties, because every keynote, every workshop I do, I bring up his book. But there's also a book called Sparks of Genius. by Dr. Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein, and it is really it's a thick book. So I mean, if you're not a reader, I don't know, but but if you are, check it out. But in the book, he talks about recognizing versus observing, and he says observation is a key skill for your creativity and your cultural competency. People who are just like not paying attention to other people or their body language or their facial expressions, you're not able to mirror. Sometimes it's just because we don't have the development. Other times there's brain issues going on. Sometimes people who may be on the spectrum may have some difficulties as well. They may have to practice in some other areas for whatever reason. But observation is a key skill. The keenest observers make use of every kind of sensory information. How have I practiced this? What does this look like at the basic level and moving on up? Dr. Bernstein says that in fact, the greatest insights, right? Insights lead to innovation. The greatest insights often come to individuals who are able to appreciate the subliminally of the mundane, the deeply surprising and meaningful beauty in everyday things, just like our sharer shared about, there's beauty in everything. And so keep that in mind. When we go through life, we're just recognizing your brain's like, that's a stapler, that's a pen, keep on moving. But to observe has you slow down and look at it in a new way, to see if there's any other functions that your imagination could dream up. You practice it with a pen, with your knick-knack, it'll come up easier when you're in a situation where you need to be creative. Experience builds observation, right? Like I said before, my research is in the neuroscience of what it means to be culturally competent and what it means to be culturally creative with one another. Experience. This is very critical for adults, but even more critical for children. The experience is building the brain. And so for my child to be in different experiences, it allows him to open up his observational gates more. If you're a lead, which you're all leaders, how are you increasing the experiences and varying them in your group? Being open to new experiences and new people. How are you reaching out to people, right? I'm only here because I reached out to, Elise, and she exposed me to all of you and this great platform. Now my social brain has added you in to my structure. Whereas have I not reached out to her, I wouldn't be here. So keep that in mind. But your brain, right? Your best friend and your worst enemy. How is that so? Why? Because of biases. Now, we don't have enough time to really go into this. I can do a whole lecture on unconscious bias. But when we think of unconscious bias, we normally think of the DEI work, right? There's a lot of conversation happening, especially if you're in America. There's a lot of conversation happening around diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, sexism, and all the other isms. What my research and book talks about is it's not just about DEI work. Biases highly control your creative thinking as well. In fact, there is a story that I found out about at a museum where a man who invented the first like smoke inhaler for that firefighters use to go into buildings so they don't inhale the smoke. This was back in the 1800s. It was a Black man who invented it, and it was just like a long tube, really cool. And he tried to get it pitched to different fire stations, but they wouldn't even see him because he was Black. He had to hire a theater actor to pretend that he invented it so he could at least pitch it to the different fire stations, and they ended up taking it on and everything. So my biases, right? And not just racism, sexism, and all the other ism, my biases against classism, right? If I see a person who I don't think is at a level that they need to be, my interpretation of their creative ideals are going to be less than. My brain will automatically focus down how highly creative or how creative I think they are because of the biases that I'm bringing to the table. And so that's why work with our own self-awareness of how are my biases affecting the way that I see myself and I see other people. Have I even worked on that? So don't just think unconscious bias is just for DEI work. It's for creativity work too. I can't tell you how many great ideas have gotten missed because of people's biases. Think about that. Really think about that, especially if you're in a leadership position and you're over people. Your work on your biases is huge because you have the power to move creative ideas around and to move people into different positions. And so your biases are influencing that. All right, one last thing before I go, feel free to take a screenshot of this. I love this activity. It's a great way to have an oxy-op, right? Oxytocin opportunity, that social bonding chemical that helps your brain bond with one another. You can do this with anything, but I have people introduce themselves with it or talk about a problem or a concept. Pick an image and tell us how this image reflects you, the essence of you, right? Metaphorically, how does the image you choose reflect the essence of who you are? And you can just put it in the chat. We don't have time to really share. All right. Like, what about the image reflects a part of your personality? So Nancy, why did you choose the octopus? Elise said she's organizing a bazillion details at the same time, right? So Eleanor, what elements about the candle reflects elements about your perspective? I'm trying to have you have that metaphorical bridge to move elements of one area over into elements of another area, which is a creative skill. Thank you, David. School of Fish. Candle is optimistic. Barb is the lightness in the dark. Thank you. So once again, bringing in different ways for people to show different facets of themselves increases their social brain, your social brain, oxytocin. If you're trying to work on team cohesion, these are multiple different ways. Novelty, right? Creativity is part of novelty. These are novel ways to allow your people to better connect and to introduce other elements of their perspective and their personality that may not have been shared had not you gone through this other gate. All right, so we're going to move in. I can do like a whole hour on a few of these. So people who are highly observant, they do something. Here's an example called like biomimicry, where they're looking at their atmosphere and having it inform the way that they create within their profession. The swimmer suit. Someone saw how sharks were built and how the sleekness helps, right? It was highly informed. A man was walking with his dog and saw that these plant-like spheres were getting caught. So that helped him think about the concept of Velcro. Who knew? Velcro is an example of someone being observant of their surroundings. Robotics, looking at animals and humans and how we move. And so there's creativity all around you, but are you just walking to the mailbox and turning around and walking back in? Keep that in mind. Here's another good book called On Looking. She took a walk with her dog, walk with a musician. She took a walk with a plumber, with a sound person, a walk with the engineer, with a chemist, with a botanist. She took a walk with people who are in different fields, right? Who solve different things on the same route. There's a wonderful book that I love called The Medici Effect. And he said, innovation happens at the intersection of disciplines, fields, and cultures. So it's people who get to the intersection, right? Kurt Vonnegut says, being on the inside, you can't see, you got to get to the edge. And so you can do this as well. Have you taken a walk with someone in a completely different field than you, and just notice what they observe. And so so it's just a quick wrap up. Your creativity rests. It rests, it's empowered. It's powered by your ability to observe. And your observation has been influenced by your culture, right? Not just your ethnic and national culture, your home culture. What type of home did you grow up in? Did you have a mom like mine that threw you in a van every summer and you were at the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, some lake in Canada, right? So keep that in mind. Or were you like my cousins, who they never left the state their whole entire childhood? You know, that affects people's creative observation. Keep that in mind. And for those of you who have a dependence in your home, what are you doing to expand their observational skills? Observation is affected by your cultural lenses, like I just said. Observe mundane objects. Mundane just means normal, everyday objects that your brain is ignoring, right? With fresh eyes. Maybe your next big idea is with that stapler, and how the stapler works is going to inform you on how your team services need to work. I don't know. And take walks with new eyes and new ears. And so that is just one gem. I could do a whole year training on all these gems, but for today we just have that one gem, and just a snippet of that one gem of a cultural observation. And I hope you got some good things from that. I do have my book right there, and then my 4-year-old, and then so this one's for the business world, right? Let me stop share. So this one's for the business world. It just really looks at intercultural creativity. And then because I am an educator and I do have credibility in K-12, I had to write one for the education world as well. So I talked to teachers and people who are in the classroom. And then my son and I wrote a children's book together called I Am Creative, and that's him. And so if you have, but it looks like a children's book, but it's actually for adults as well, because it's simple, like Dr. Platt says, but you can really talk about some of these concepts and how creativity shows up. It's based off of the 16 Diamond Tools of Creative Thinking that you can find on the CAFFE website. And I would end with a song, but you have a little bit of time. Just and actually, for my keynotes, I do end with a song, because that's one way that, like Dr. Platt says, I get people's brains in synchrony. Music is very powerful. And so the 7 gems are a color of a rainbow. So I go with the colors of the rainbow. So it's pretty easy.